took time to come here. He's come with a few other people.
Jared Cohen.
Jared, and a few others.
My daughter Sophie.
And so yeah, so we are here to make sure that he's comfortable and happy in Kenya. So he can visit Kenya.
And I think we've done well. If you look at all of our core product lines are getting stronger. And we've also done well because the sort of key four companies, which are basically Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Apple, all are network platform companies that are doing well in one way or the other. What we're seen as now leading in our space in a way that we very didn't catch up. Android, on its way to 1 billion phones, and I would assume very popular here. Chrome, of course, is an amazing success. Gmail, everyone saw where all the growth is. YouTube, Psy is now 1.1 billion views, which is an awful lot of people watching Psy do his dance. And YouTube continues to grow at 50 plus% a year, which is amazing. I go on and on. Enterprise business, obviously core search. We've got a lot of new search things happening, and we have all the usual issues. I think the number one issue in the company is the transition from web to mobile. I think here you've made a lot of that already because many of your users are mobile only. Mobile use is different from the web, and the monetization and the ad systems and so forth need to be changed. This is a problem everybody faces. We had an issue with the United States government trying to fight us over antitrust. We won that very clearly. It was announced last week. I'm very, very proud of the way we did that. I was also in charge of it, which is also good things. I'm very proud of that. And then we have a set of issues in Europe, which I'm also working on, which I spent a lot of time on. And I think that will be resolved quite successfully as well, as opposed to what Microsoft and Microsoft is going through. So my sense is that we're going to have quite a good year. That looking at the product lines, all of the investment, the new structure, which is called product areas, is very, very tightly focused on making these products that much stronger. I think you'll see that. So rather than sort of going on and on, I figured maybe you will have comments about that or anything else. I had a very brief introduction to where we are in Kenya. I was here, believe it or not, 7 years ago on Safari, so before this was set up. I remember when we first met saying, I think Nairobi is a great place, because of course I visited here, and that this would be a great place to run our operations from, basically improving that. And the plans for this group are obviously to continue to expand and invest in everything you're doing, so it's all positive message. So questions or comments on that or anything else? Yes, question.
Yeah. So 6 years ago, you made the decision to set up Google in Africa. What makes you reassured that that was a good decision? And secondly, in SSA, in 5 years' time, what one thing would you like to see here that would make you uncomfortably excited?
It was the same answer then, it's the same answer now. In the future, I want more users. Because if we have users, we can solve all the other problems. With users, we can make money. With users, we can make it faster. With users, if we don't have users, we don't have anything. So our business is fundamentally a usage game. I'm open to how we get those users, by the way, as long as it's legal. If they're mobile users or with a partnership with telecoms or whatever it takes. But I think the core strategy of the company has always been users first. And if you look at the way this was set up, it was originally not set up as a sales operation. It was set up as a strategic operation. And in fact, it was not even run out of sales. And we agreed to basically invest for many years to get to the point where we figured there would be some revenue. So I believe users first, and then the revenue and the businesses and the partnerships all come. And I think so far that's proven it. So in 5 years, you better be a lot bigger. Lots more users, lots more countries, lots faster networks, lots more people doing things on top of Google, lots more content, especially in Swahili and the other languages in the countries that we cover, lots more accelerators, lots more cable, just more and more of that. And I'll view that as a great success. Yes, sir.
So, I'm Elijah. I work in the Uganda office in business development.
You're Nigerian?
Elijah.
Elijah.
Yes. I'm not
Elijah,
Nigerian.
are you from Kenya?
No,
Where are you from?
from Uganda.
From Uganda. Another Uganda. Two Ugandans. Ugandans are slowly taking over.
But surely. Slowly but
So
surely.
it was explained by the Ugandan that Kenya was paradise because it was next to Uganda.
Exactly. This is true. So my question is, if we want more users, the way that we've approached it so far is we've taken an approach that focuses on 3 areas. So accessibility, relevance, and sustainability. In your view, if we're to do just one thing well, and let's assume if we did that one thing, we're extremely successful, which of those 3 would you choose?
I would start with access because my experience is that everything you do to increase the quality of the connection drives everything else. So you start off with low quality content. The connection gets faster, you get better quality content. The connection gets faster, you get better video. Now, obviously, you want to do both. So please, you gave me the which one would you pick first? But to me, access is the first one. And by the way, this is still true in America. Why do you think we're investing in Kansas City? Right? Because gigabit Ethernet will drive a new set of content, a new set of apps, and so forth. Now, you don't do it exclusively, and you have to do other things, and so forth. It always has to be first. And in Africa, for some reason, we have to do more of the work on the access than we have in other more developed areas. Just it's a development issue.
Actually, as we were speaking earlier, one of the core drivers for access is affordable, cheap electricity. And if you look at Africa, it's probably one of the biggest business opportunities in terms of even returns, because the demand is very high. Is this something that Google would be considering it will actually also influence a lot of the activities?
I think that the decision to invest in cables and basically proxy caches and so forth is a very easy decision. The decision to invest in mobile software, mobile partnership, that's easy decisions. I think the actual going up the chain of power is probably a more complicated decision. It might make sense, but it's not in the brain. And so I would encourage you to float the idea, but I couldn't predict where the decision would. We've never really faced that question in a coherent way. And my question would be, okay, so to actually own a power plant, so why would we do a better job running it than another company which we help to back? You see what I'm saying? In other words, wouldn't it be better to have somebody set up a power plant and we'll guarantee we buy the power for them? And that way they get the bank financing. In other words, use our credit. For us to actually run power, you gotta really want it. I like to do things where we're uniquely better than anyone else.
Actually, that's a good segue to my question. Sure. Can I go up?
Sure. You promised to let me after.
Yeah, no, you've been quoted many times saying that the web and actually the world would be a very different place for the next 3 billion set of users.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
5 actually.
5 billion users because of who they are, but also because they'll be accessing it and contributing to it through mobile. It looks like we're actually in the best place to accelerate that reality through Android, through Motorola, and just through Google, through all the services we work with. So the question is, similar to the one you asked us, what's the most audacious thing you think we can do with those 2 things, with Android, with Motorola, in emerging markets to accelerate?
I don't know that Motorola. We've decided to run them separately, and they're busy on their own product cycles. I know for Android, there have been a series of designs for a low-cost, powerful Android. The sort of design target, cost target was $100 with a reasonable screen, reasonable processor, and something that would have good performance. And that, getting the chips down, most of the cost is in the screen, getting the screen cost down. So that's probably the biggest single technical thing we can do. one of the proposals that we made was, what would happen if we just gave everybody phones? And the problem is there's too many people to give phones. Even for Google, too many. It's just too many people. It doesn't make good sense to give phones away, but it makes a lot of sense to build inexpensive Android phones with partners and design Jared and my daughter Sophie and I have written a book on this next 5 billion. Would you guys like to comment on what is possible for the next 5 billion?
So the book itself looks more at what the consequences of those people coming online are. So much of what we talk about in the book is cyber attacks and states using surveillance technologies and that sort of thing. On the better end, you have really, really exciting healthcare technology in the first and developing worlds, right? You have special nanobot that can go through your bloodstream and monitor your heart rate and all sorts of crazy things that detect early stage cancers, exciting things like that we are going to see more use of nanotechnology, better connectivity in the first world and third world. You guys know all this already, but you have a lot of sort of great telemedicine work, a lot of interesting stuff coming out of the rural connections. Kind of thing.
So the biggest thing is once all these people are connected, the improvement in health and education is pretty fundamental, just from the smartphone. And we want to distinguish between the smartphone and the feature phone because we need a browser. It's sort of a browser-capable device is key. Jerry, did you want to?
Yeah, one other thing that I'll add to this is when you look at this next 5 billion set of users, they're mostly coming online in parts of the world that have a greater and different set of challenges than the first 2 billion. Oftentimes places where there's a lot of conflict, where there's violence that's fairly pervasive. And if you look at a lot of the challenges that as an industry we're going to gain greater visibility into, they don't, as a company you're not really set up to address them, right? It's not quite philanthropy, it's not quite core business, it's not quite government relations. So a lot of what we look at in the book and what we look at Google Ideas is how do we proactively start thinking about some of these future challenges that we're going to encounter with our future users. Because we have 2 choices as a company, we could be proactive or reactive about it. And we owe our future users more than kind of 24 hours of crisis communications around huge challenges facing humanity.
Yes, my question is more around innovation. So right now in Kenya we are working on Beba, which is an NFC-based Android mobile payments solution. And I think for SSA it's probably the first time we've really gone into the innovation space with the market, where you're understanding the market to come up with a solution that suits it. And I think it's a very exciting project. Now the question is looking at, maybe building on that actually, when you look at other multinationals, IBM, Nokia, maybe even Huawei, they're starting to build R&D centers within Africa because they're looking to understand Africa and be able to look at it as a future opportunity. So from a Google perspective, do you see a future where Google will bring innovation into Africa and start to also develop within the market and have an innovation hub or center or engineering center within Africa?
I do, and I wanted one earlier than now. I was constantly stymied by various people who made roughly the following argument. If you want the right product, we can't get the kind of engineers we need yet in Nairobi or Egypt or so forth. I believe that at some point we'll be able to get that. So the answer came back that the number of engineers that we could attract that had the right skills, we just couldn't figure out a way to get them. I am skeptical of Nokia, IBM, Huawei, really building serious R&D centers. They're typically much more likely to be partnership schemes of one kind or another. That's typically what companies do. Huawei, for example, does all of its development in a city that they own. So I think one of the problems we have is that engineering nowadays at Google is best done in one place as opposed to distributed. And that's, I think, that's a truth. I'm not happy with that truth, but it's true. So we ended up with a lot of development in Zurich, which is not where I would have picked. But we had a lot of really smart people there who really cared a lot. So I think over time, I don't know, this is a long-winded way of saying I agree with you, but I don't know when. A lot of it comes back to your question, how many more users, how much scale, can we build? But I would certainly like to see it.
So Africa's potential in terms of advertising spend is actually quite large. First, it's primarily tapped currently. And Joe has done an excellent job of reinforcing the fact that the media press is growing and otherwise we're going to get online and things like that. But as yet, it's still not a major source of revenue for me.
That's okay. We're patient.
So,
but come on. What is the growth rate of Kenya right now? 6%. Do you have any idea how much Americans would like that? 6%. Do the math in terms of compounding. If you can grow that way for a few years, what kinds of things happen? Export markets, new buildings, new markets, new billboards, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm not worried about that as long as the programming is correct. As long as the decisions are right, principles are followed, we just focus on the user, it will come. It really will come. Did you? I answered your question. Maybe you should ask your question.
I think you might have already answered. You asked Google's outlook for Africa is for the long term or
It's always for the long term.
And just pull out very quickly.
There's no evidence of pulling out of Africa. We continue to actually expand. My criticism is that I'd like to see more countries. We have offices in a small number of countries, and yet we have 1 billion people in Africa. And we should have more physical presence. It makes a difference. I would like to see much more access investment. I'd like to see more capital. All that kind of stuff. I mean, I understand it takes a while. And yes,
So my question is about many of us joined Google to have an impact in Africa, and sometimes some of the decisions that we see coming out of Mountain View and the headquarters have, let's say, are negative towards that objective. They don't help us get there. For example, the recent decision to discontinue apps, the free version of apps. So my question is sort of the thinking around some of those things, and what would we do, for example, for all the entrepreneurs affected by that? Because we see the impact here with the entrepreneur community. So just what's the thinking around that, and what can Google do?
I don't, on the sort of free versus paid apps, I was not in the meeting where they made that decision. The core problem with Africa is that there's not enough time spent on African issues, given all the other issues in the company. And that's why we have you all. But it also means that sometimes an insufficient amount of attention is paid to the special needs of an emerging market where monetization is poor or what have you. So, for example, paid apps versus free apps for Africa, it's a rounding error in money. It's a very small amount of money difference, and yet it's strategically huge to keep it being free. So that's an example. I can take that feedback back. But I think I can assure you that kind of decision was not made with anyone in the room saying, "What about Africa?"
I mean, I think that's our biggest challenge as a team.
So are there others besides paid versus free apps?
Yes, it is actually the scaling of many products like books, the Play Store, etc., and the opening to all countries. I think it's perceived as, well, Africa's lagging behind because we don't have access to it.
In some cases, that's because the contracts don't allow it. So the reason I picked on apps is that's something we control, so there's only Google to blame for that decision. Many of unfortunately, the way intellectual property people work is they would prefer to not have a contract and not have the customers than to negotiate a contract for Africa, which is stupid. And I think ultimately the internet will break that down as people discover how big a market this is. But my favorite example is I was visiting with the fellow who did Breaking Bad, and this is a show that I like. And the fellow did it, and he said, "I have a problem in Ireland." And I go, "What?" He said, "Well, the company that did distribution decided Ireland was too small a country to do a distribution license. So it's completely stolen to watch. It's So what do you expect? Irish people, it's a great show. so they managed to do exactly the wrong thing. Right? They managed to end up with training people to steal their product and not make any money at the same time. And the Irish people are perfectly happy to pay for watching the television show. So this is why lawyers in the entertainment business have such a bad name, because they're really stupid. And we've been working through this over and over again with YouTube, for example, Google Play, and it just drives you crazy. The music industry.
So, just to change a bit, you've seen people like Chris who have come back, Fazana from other countries, who come back to Kenya. Google has been great in bringing people back. We know that you're close to President Obama. Can you convince him to run?
The office of the ex-president is a very lucrative one in America. So I have a feeling that President Obama, at the end of his second term, will be extremely happy to be capable of making a very large amount of money after he's president. And he will be in great demand to give speeches, etc. And I'm sure that serving as the leader of Kenya would disqualify him from doing it. And therefore, it's highly unlikely. I will, however, suggest this, so that I can show my sort of street cred. But he originally from here?
Yes.
His father was here.
So he is from here, according to our.
Is that true?
Yes, he's here.
Wow. He's eligible. Is he actually eligible?
Yes.
Does he know this? I think he would miss Air Force One and all that.
Piggybacking off of that, what's the most memorable anecdote that either Jared or President Obama or anyone else has shared with you about Kenya?
Jared, what's your most memorable?
Me? So it's interesting. My first trip to Kenya was in 2001. I lived in. I spent almost 4 months in a really, as Chris knows, in a very remote village called Lodaria. It's sort of like in the middle of nowhere, way beyond this area. And I remember, thinking I really wanted to immerse myself, so I'm not going to bring any material possessions. So I didn't bring a toothbrush. I didn't bring a change of clothes. I didn't really bring anything.
Only Jared would do.
And I was all excited, and then I realized after about a week that just sort of herding goats and cows every day and eating this mixture of iron-rich dirt and milk is like not that fulfilling. And I started to get really bored. And I caught myself sort of like making sculptures out of rocks and kind of talking to myself. But it ended up.
It has continued to be.
But clearly in the end it was a good experience because I've been back to the village 5 times and we're actually going tomorrow. And it's amazing. Every time, the anecdote piece of this that's interesting is every time I go back, something dramatic has changed. So when I was there was no electricity, no running water, no mobile phones, and last time I went back, the Maasai women had made these wonderful pouches for their mobile phones. They were using M-Pesa. There's no electricity, so I don't know where they plug them in. But it's just extraordinary that even in these remote places, mobile phones come even before electricity does.
I should say that we were in North Korea for 3 days, and we decided not to take our mobile devices into North Korea. And of course, there was no access to the internet. It was very strange not to be connected. And it was a good reminder that I enjoy being connected. And so we forget how quickly our lives, personal lives, have changed. So thinking of your story from a decade ago, you couldn't do it now because they would have phones, and you get on with their phones. Yeah. Sorry, you had a question.
So in terms of one other thing, it's a similar situation to the apps that we control is being the ability for Android developers to sell their apps. So all other Nokia, iPhone, everyone else, you can sell your apps in SSA or on the platform, but not Android is only free apps. So paid. So on one hand, you're talking about the ecosystem, running competitions.
Is that a legal issue or?
actually don't know why he is.
It's too complicated. It's a priority issue. We're asking, I think, at least even for South Africa.
Yeah, it's obvious if you think about it. You need paid apps because in order to have software developers to make money, they have to be paid. Or at least they have to believe that they're going to get paid.
Right, but we don't have a story we sell because everyone else, Nokia has done it, and we have a presence. We do work with developers and trainings, but they can't get paid. And that's within our control. I think that the other challenge for us, and maybe it'd be interesting to hear experience with other emerging markets. I've only been at Google, it's my second year, but I find from process, I spend, I think, more than 60% of my time, and especially being so remote, on internal process and procedures because people don't understand our market and our issues. And sometimes it drains, it's just draining. It's worse than dealing with African governments. Which says a lot, but not all the time, but it's becoming really painful. And any thoughts, just from a company perspective, whether it's feedback you're getting elsewhere and whether we're thinking about making things easier for ourselves.
We've had this problem in the emerging markets for a while. Because what happens is people in emerging markets report up into their various functions, like you yourselves work.
Right.
And so there's this weird problem where to do anything, you have to go to another country, and then it has to go over and come down from the other country back to the same building. It seems kind of stupid. So my general advice is try to do the right thing, as best you can, and usually that's sort of the right way to handle these things. It's not a solved problem, and it is solved to some degree by growth. As you become more important, these issues get worked out. To give you an example, when we started payments, we had payments in pounds and euros, basically. There were all these other currencies that we couldn't do inside in the US. And everywhere I would go, people were just obsessed about this because they couldn't make money. Right? And I said, I don't understand why the engineering team can't get this fixed. Well, there was always a reason. But nowadays, we fixed that. It took us a few years. But my guess is it's the same. I don't see the needs here sufficient, that different from anywhere else. There's differences in language, but it's pretty much the same products. Same human beings. So, I'm not sure, I don't have a good answer.
So we've run out of time, and I'll just take this time to thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm doing some stuff at a university, and I'm visiting some interesting people at a smart people's dinner. Basically his friend. Visiting with the government. Who else are we talking about this trip? Gary Candy, who else are we talking about? We're talking to your government officials?
Yes. We're meeting with some NGOs.
Some NGOs, okay, good.
But we want to thank you very much for having come. And everybody, please remember what we've discussed is confidential, it's only internal. But we hear you're going to Masai Land. And we're very proud that you actually set up this office. You pushed for Africa to be set up, and so we have something small for you.
Oh no.
Thank you.
Uh-oh. This is going to be useful as well.
That's a share.
This is oh my gosh. Imagine.
You'd be safe with that.
Right. Yes, but we have that's for defense.
You think I'm going to take this on the airplane? I'm going to get through security?
Yes, we have one of this.
Yeah. Eric, you have to jump. God, this thing looks like
yeah, so on behalf of Google Kenya, Google Africa, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Jared?
We know that yes, you'll get still. We got one for you.
Eric, you can fight if we don't stop.
Sophie. have something for you as well.
Nobody forgets me.
Yeah. This is fashion from Masai land as well. So
On the side?
yeah,
I'm touched.
Exactly, would you prefer to have this? I think it's going to be very useful. Some of these in graduate school, they're going to be very useful for
It's true.
This is actually pretty neat.
thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you. That's very, very nice.
Thank you.
Okay.